World War II ended 8 decades ago, yet its roar still thunders through cinema's greatest frames. Tonight we unlock 24 masterpieces, stories etched in steel helmets, piano keys, and tear-stained letters that refuse to let memory fade. From submarine claustrophobia to resistance romance, each film lifts a different corner of history's curtain. Ready? Press play, and let their echoes guide our journey tonight. Flags of Our Fathers, 2006, directed by Clint Eastwood. Picture the iconic Ewima flag raising frozen in time, 3 seconds of triumph that sold 7 million war bonds and rewrote the lives of the 6 young Marines who happened to be there. Eastwood's film rips that photograph out of your classroom textbook and drops it, still wet with blood-slick sand, onto the screen. We follow medic Doc Bradley, native sharpshooter Ira Hayes, and quiet runner Renee Gagnon on 2 fronts at once: the island's sulfur-reeking moonscape and the neon canyons of stateside publicity tours. The tonal whiplash is intentional. 1 minute you're deafened by artillery concussions. The next, a brass band drowns out survivors' guilt. Flashbacks fracture chronology, mirroring memories the veterans themselves can't line up. By the time the film asks who really planted that flag, and why America needed a myth so badly, you feel complicit. Eastwood's restrained lens never sermonizes, yet every frame whispers an indictment. Heroism sold by the yard costs more than any nation can repay. Fury, 2014, directed by David Ayer. A Sherman tank named Fury creeps through German mud so thick it threatens to swallow the war whole. Inside the steel womb, Brad Pitt's grizzled sergeant. War Daddy keeps a 5-man crew alive on adrenaline, profanity, and a private faith that killing Nazis is righteous work. New recruit Norman, baby-faced and shaking, becomes our proxy. Every cramped corridor echoes with his panic. Fury's interior is filmed like a submarine, claustrophobic, oil-streaked, and lit by muzzle flashes. Outside, phosphorus tracers paint night skies with demonic fireworks. When the crew occupies a ruined German flat for a brief, eerie family luncheon, you sense how fragile civility has become. Then the climax strands the tank alone against an SS battalion, and the film mutates into an Alamo-style last stand. Except every clang of ricochet reminds you there's no frontier to defend, only exhausted men trying to finish a job history will never thank them for. Ayer's raw, unvarnished combat makes heroism feel like self-harm. Greyhound, 2020, directed by Aaron Schneider. The Battle of the Atlantic usually unfolds in grand strategy maps: convoys, wolf packs, tonnage sunk. Greyhound shrinks that panorama to one bridge, 72 hours, and the haunted eyes of Commander Ernest Krauss. It's 1942. His destroyer must shepherd 37 merchant ships through the Black Pit, a mid-ocean gap beyond Allied air cover. Every radar ping sounds like a ticking heart monitor. Dialogue snaps in coded phrases. Hard right rudder, bring her around, until you become fluent in naval adrenaline. Yet beneath Krauss's crisp commands lurks penitent faith. He prays over cold coffee, counting the souls he might soon lose. CGI waves crest like marble statues, beautiful and lethal, while submerged U-boats taunt over open radio. We hunt you, Greyhound. When a torpedo track bruises the sea, the camera pivots 360 degrees, trapping you on deck. By voyage's end, Krauss limps to his cabin and drops to his knees, not in triumph, but in grateful exhaustion. The war, you realize, will wake him tomorrow at dawn. The Counterfeiters, 2007, directed by Stefan Rusovitsky. Salomon Sally Sorowich, master forger and Viennese playboy, survives his arrest not by luck, but by skill. The Nazis need fake pounds and dollars to sabotage Allied economies. In Sachsenhausen's Block 19, printer's ink replaces Zyklon B, yet death lurks in every misaligned watermark. Rusowitsky shoots in tight, tobacco-stained palettes, making parchment and presses feel as menacing as barbed wire. Moral lines blur. Is perfecting Hitler's counterfeits a betrayal or a lifeline for fellow inmates? Sally's cynical grin gradually cracks under the weight of that question. We watch artisans debate sabotage in whispers, while a swing record smuggled into the barrack crackles with forbidden joy. The climax arrives not with gunfire, but with a single flawed note plate, an intentional defect that could doom them all or save thousands. As liberation dawns, Sally strolls the French Riviera in a tuxedo that suddenly feels like a prison stripe, reminding us that freedom purchased with compromised integrity can never be fully tailored to fit. The Great Escape, 1963, director John Sturges. Cue Elmer Bernstein's Whistling March and Steve McQueen revving a Triumph motorbike. This is adventure with a noose around its neck. We Stalag Luft. 3 houses the RAF's most incorrigible escapists. The Nazis built it escape-proof, which only challenges the prisoner's ingenuity. Over 2 clock-ticking hours, Sturges turns blueprint minutia into edge-of-seat drama. Forged papers aged with tea, tunnel dirt scattered in trouser legs, a clandestine bellows, rig pumping air into the earth. The ensemble cast, James Garner's genial scrounger, Charles Bronson's claustrophobic digger, feels like a league of resourceful schoolboys daring the ultimate prank. Yet the prank's punchline is brutal. After a jubilant breakout, German machine guns silence the theme tune, and McQueen's legendary fence jump becomes a desperate lunge at freedom's mirage. History records 50 recaptured men executed on Hitler's orders. The film leaves you with the taste of dust and triumph, underscoring how courage can roar in one breath and fall silent in the next. The Longest Day, 1962, directed by Zanuck, Anakin, and Martin. Shot in crisp black and white in 5 separate languages, this panoramic epic feels less like a movie and more like June 6, 1944, unfolding in real time. Generals, paratroopers, French resistance farmers, even a nervous Wehrmacht cook, every perspective gets a spotlight as weather, tides, and sheer human stubbornness waltz toward history's pivotal dawn. The film juggles comic irony with chilling fatalism. Practical effects put 23,000 extras on Normandy sands, and each landing craft that drops its ramp seems to disgorge another micro-story of terror and resolve. By nightfall, the beachheads are secured, but the camera lingers on medics tagging the dead with playing cards, a quiet coda to the most kinetic day imaginable. The Longest Day doesn't ask if D-Day was necessary. It asks how so many ordinary people found the courage to gamble everything on one tide-bound morning. A Bridge Too Far, 1977, directed by Richard Attenborough. Operation Market Garden was Churchill's gamble to stab straight into Nazi Germany before Christmas '44. Attenborough's camera stalks that ambition from sky and street. Fleets of C-47s disgorge paratroopers like confetti, while on Arnhem's spidery bridge, a handful of Brits cling to steel that glows red-hot under tank fire. The cast, Redford, Connery, Kane, play chess pieces pushed by distant generals, sure their plan is 90% certain. Yet radio sets crackle with silence, pontoons sink in rain-swollen rivers, and hope drains from soldiers' faces as the timetable slips. The film spares no tragedy. Dutch civilians offer tulips to troops who will soon be cut off for months, but it never surrenders admiration for the men who advanced anyway. When Colonel Frost surveys dwindling ammo and declares, "Well, this is it," the bridge itself seems to groan in sympathy. The title's fatal extra mile lingers as metaphor. Sometimes, courage outpaces possibility. Hacksaw Ridge, 2016, director Mel Gibson. Desmond Doss is a wiry Seventh-day Adventist who won't touch a rifle, yet begs to join the Pacific War as a combat medic. Boot camp ridicule is filmed like a courtroom drama. Fists and taunts test his conviction with cross-examination. Then, Okinawa erupts. Hacksaw Ridge is a sheer cliff. The platoon climbs into an inferno of mortar bursts that vaporize flesh before the eyes can blink. Gibson's hyper-real gore feels, paradoxically, reverent. Each torn limb underscores the miracle of Doss hauling 75 wounded men to safety by rope sling. Between rescues, he mutters a prayer. Just one more. That refrain, whispered over shrieking artillery, becomes the film's hymn to stubborn compassion. When Doss finally touches a rifle, it's to brace the stretcher line, not to kill. A small visual thesis on faith under fire. The Thin Red Line, 1998 director, Terrence Malick. Malick trades plot for perception, turning Guadalcanal into a living organism that watches its invaders with ancient eyes. Sunlight flutters through kunai grass like shrapnel made of gold. Meanwhile, whispered voiceovers from privates, captains, even the island itself, ask what war does to souls already bruised by memory. Ordinary beats stretch, a canteen passed between foxholes, a wounded bird trembling in a GI's palm. Suddenly violence detonates, and the camera glides past explosions as though nature itself is indifferent to man's thunder. We meet Sergeant, Welsh, nihilist pragmatist, and private. Wit, dream-soaked idealist. Their friction suggests war is fought not just between nations, but within the human heart. By the time rain rinses blood off leaves, you realize the thin red line is the hairbreadth separating grace from brutality, and every soldier walks it alone. Inglorious Bastards, 2009, directed by Quentin Tarantino. History fractures in Tarantino's grindhouse prism, yet emotional truth seeps through each stylized crack. Chapter 1. A French dairy farm, sunlight warm as honey. Then enters Colonel, Hans Landa, whose polite diction slides around horror like silk over a dagger. Jews hiding beneath floorboards hold their breath. Cinephiles in the audience do, too. Fast forward to Lieutenant Aldo Raines' scalp hunters carving a path of fear through occupied France, their Appalachian slang clashing with orchestral Morricone cues. Cinema itself becomes a weapon when Shosanna, lone survivor of Landa's raid, plans a fiery premiere for Hitler. The climactic theater massacre is both revenge fantasy and love letter to film's power. Nitrate reels combust, erasing tyranny in a roar of flickering frames. Tarantino asks, if movies can lie, can they also correct history's cruel script? The answer explodes across the screen in incandescent reels. Life is Beautiful, 1997, directed by Roberto Benigni. Guido's world begins in sun-dappled Tuscany, where he woos Dora with pratfalls and puns, every gag a seed of hope planted against coming darkness. When fascist laws tighten and father, mother, and son are herded onto a night train, the genre pivots but the clown keeps juggling. Inside the camp, Guido improvises a game with complex rules. Obey guards, earn points, and first prize is a real tank. The boy believes, the audience half believes, clinging to fantasy as tightly as he clings to his papa's hand. Benigni's camera often frames Guido in mid-gesture, as though comedy itself stalls the machinery of genocide for a heartbeat. In the grim finale, Guido parades in guard uniform, slapstick goose-step hiding terror, before vanishing off-frame with a single gunshot. Yet, when a U.S. Sherman rumbles in and the boy rides atop, waving, the illusion proves stronger than the cruelty it defied. The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946, directed by William Wyler. The war ends with ticker tape, but for three veterans the hardest battles begin at home. Al Stevenson returns to a banking job that now feels petty. Fred Derry swaps bomber glory for soda fountain drudgery. Sailor Homer Parrish, portrayed by real amputee Harold Russell, hides metal hooks in his pockets like shameful secrets. Wyler films Midwestern streets in deep focus, letting neon bar signs dwarf men who once commanded fleets. PTSD has no name yet, so nightmares speak their own language. Shattered greenhouse glass echoes aerial flak. A wedding ring won't slide over prosthetic steel. Still, love probes the cracks. Homer's childhood sweetheart calmly unbuckles his harness, showing him he's still whole enough to be held. The final montage, weddings, embraces, soft dance hall jazz, doesn't promise tidy closure. It offers something braver, permission to stumble forward. In that hesitant hope, the film finds its quiet victory. Downfall, 2004, director Oliver Hirschbiegel. Berlin, April 1945. The Third Reich is cracked concrete and falling plaster. Yet inside Hitler's bunker, the Führer still examines phantom divisions on a coffee-stained map. Hirschspiegel's handheld camera prowls narrow corridors where generals whisper mutiny and secretaries hide tears behind carbon paper. Bruno Ganz's Hitler is neither monster nor martyr, but a feverish old man who ricochets from grandfatherly charm to genocidal rage in a single breath. Terrifying, precisely because you recognize the human tremor beneath the myth. As Soviet artillery rattles ceiling lamps, the bunker devolves into a subterranean fever dream. Goebbels' children lullabied toward cyanide. Eva Braun twirls an evening dress while mortar dust flutters like sinister confetti. Outside, Berlin's streets glow hell red, and a lone boy mans an anti-tank gun taller than himself. The film ends not with glory or condemnation, but with hollow echoes. When the screen fades, you feel history inhaling, amazed the world kept turning after so profound a moral cliff edge. Letters from Ewima, 2006, Dyer, Clint Eastwood. From volcanic tunnels beneath Iwo Jima, General Kurabayashi writes gentle letters home, sketching Mount Fuji in pencil while calculating how few shells remain. Eastwood filters the battle through ashen grays, as though color itself has fled the island. We follow Baker-turned-Private Saigo, whose only wish is to see his newborn daughter, and Baron Nishi, Olympic equestrian-turned-tank killer who still feeds wounded Marines chocolate. As American shells carve craters like open graves, Kuribayashi reinvents defense, reverse-sloping artillery, interlocking caves, the promise to bleed the enemy long enough to slow invasion of the homeland. Yet the film's heartbeat is quieter, buried letters slipped into sand that speak of cherry blossoms and rice harvests. When surrender becomes impossible, some soldiers choose grenades, others crawl into surf, seeking capture. The film refuses melodrama. It simply listens to men realizing posterity will never read their words. By framing the war through these letters, Eastwood rescues humanity from beneath centuries of propaganda. Patton, 1970, Darius Franklin J. Schaffner. A huge American flag fills the screen. From the bottom strides George S. Patton in polished cavalry boots, metal chest glinting like a myth newly minted. He speaks not to troops, but to us, the audience, delivering a profanity-laced sermon on killing that somehow lands like gospel. Schaffner's widescreen canvas follows Patton from the deserts of North Africa, where he consults ancient battle maps as though conversing with ghosts, to the snow-choked Ardennes, where tanks stall and his temper flares hot enough to melt ice. Patton treats war as personal destiny. He compares reincarnated soldiers' spirits, slaps a shell-shocked private, prays for clear skies so his air force can strafe the enemy. Yet, the film is no hagiography. Jerry Goldsmith's martial score sometimes twists into eerie echo, hinting that glory may be another form of madness. In the final scene, Patton walks past windmills, quoting that all empires fade, the warrior alone, saluting a history that may never fully salute him back. Rome, Open City, 1946, directed by Roberto Rossellini. Filmed barely 6 months after liberation, this raw cornerstone of Italian neorealism breathes the actual dust of wartime streets. Rossellini borrows extras fresh from clandestine firefights, so every glance carries secrets. Pina, pregnant and barefoot, races after a priest who smuggles messages for the resistance. Her final scream in the gutter feels less acted than witnessed. Interiors are underlit, their hungry shadows hiding both fugitives and informants. Exteriors show Gestapo, trucks rattling over cobblestones still scarred by combat. Father Don Pietro, warm-eyed yet iron-spined, becomes the city's conscience, blessing submachine guns before mass. When torture rooms clamp down on flesh, Rossellini cuts not away but inward, letting the priest's silent prayers overtake sound. The film ends on a hilltop outside Rome, boys in oversized caps shouldering rifles at dawn, child soldiers inheriting a war-torn sunrise. Open City refuses closure, offering instead a stark promise. Life continues, but innocence must now learn to reload. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957, directed by David Lean. Colonel Nicholson strides into a Burmese POW camp, whistling Colonel Bogey, and radiating an English discipline so rigid it bends into obsession. Lean cinemascope vistas frame two dueling manias: Nicholson's drive to build the perfect bridge and Colonel Saito's desperation to finish it before monsoon rains disgrace the Emperor. Meanwhile, behind enemy lines, a sardonic American commando named Shears plots to blow the same bridge sky high. The film's tension stems from a question hammered by each mallet stroke. Can honor become treason when misplaced? Sun-bleached bamboo turns golden at dusk, making the bridge appear almost holy, while nearby graves sink unnoticed into mud. At the climax, Nicholson realizes, seconds too late, what his pride has wrought, stammering, "What have I done?" as detonators click. The blast sends lumber, trains, and ideologies crashing into the Kwai, and Alec Guinness's glassy eyes freeze that moment when duty pivots into self-betrayal. Dunkirk, 2017, directed by Christopher Nolan. 3 timelines, 3 elements: land, sea, air. Nolan braids them like fuse wire leading to the same detonation: evacuation. On the mole, teenage soldier Tommy scrambles for space on any vessel afloat, the horizon mirroring his pulse in staccato bursts of Stuka sirens. At sea, civilian skipper Mr. Dawson steers his little moonstone towards smoke plumes, silence stretching between father and shell-shocked passenger like a wound that words can't suture. Above, RAF pilot Farrier measures fuel and fate in equal drips, cockpit glass framing skies that could be heaven, if not for tracer streaks carving them apart. Hans Zimmer's score ticks like an anxious heart, merging with ship holes groaning and bullets skimming water. Dialogue is minimal. The story tells itself through faces smeared with oil and fear, through white foam turning black with leaking diesel. When boats, thatched roofs and all, fill the channel like migrating swans, the film elevates retreat to an anthem of collective endurance. Casablanca, 1942, directed by Michael Curtiz. Fog drifts across the runway at night, a ghostly curtain between exile and hope. In Rick's Café Américain, the clink of glasses masks every secret: forged visas, stifled revolutions, lovers on borrowed time. Humphrey Bogart's Rick appears carved from cigarette smoke, cynical, unmovable, until Ingrid Bergman's Ilsa steps through the bead curtains and time itself hiccups. Flashbacks to Paris flutter like propaganda leaflets: champagne, La Marseillaise, a train whistle slicing their farewell. Now, in Vichy-held Morocco, heroism hides behind roulette wheels and wary piano keys. Rick owns the papers that can free Ilsa's resistance leader husband, but freedom costs him the last scrap of his own happiness. Curtis frames the final airstrip scene with engines roaring like beating hearts. Rick's fedora tips, the lover's part, and romance trades places with resistance. "We'll always have Paris," he says, yet the fog swallows even memory. The film insists that personal sacrifice can ignite global change. Sometimes the most intimate goodbye turns the war's tide. The Pianist, 2002, directed by Roman Polanski. Warsaw, 1939. Pianist Władysław Szpilman coaxes Chopin from radio keys as German shells drum louder than his metronome. Adrian Brody's gaunt cheeks mirror the city's crumbling brickwork, while Nazi decrees strip Jews of sidewalks, then homes, then names. Ghetto life shrinks to half notes. A smuggled can of pickles, a violin traded for bread. During deportations, Polanski's handheld camera trembles with remembered terror from his own childhood escape. Szpilman survives by hiding, first in construction sites, then beneath busted upright pianos whose strings hum when artillery rattles window panes. Music becomes ghostly. He rehearses on tabletops, fingers tapping silent keys. Liberation approaches like a hesitant crescendo. A German officer discovers Szpilman yet spares him, the unlikely melody of compassion inside cataclysm. When the Pianist finally performs for Polish radio again, his still-bandaged hands hover before striking the first chord, and the battered city seems to inhale. Out of ruin, art breathes, proof that creation can outlast destruction's longest note. Das Boot, 181 Regie, Wolfgang Petersen. The steel hull of U-96 is a womb and a tomb, 52 souls boiled in diesel fumes beneath the Atlantic. Petersen's lens skims narrow passageways where sweaty sailors trade bawdy jokes to mask pulse-beat dread. Outside, sonar pings echo like underwater clock ticks counting down to implosion. When depth charges detonate, the camera jolts, bulkheads groan, and rivets sweat rust red. Above water, victory speeches claim U-boat supremacy. Below, crewmen scrape mildew off stale bread. A storm scenes slams waves over the conning tower. Moonlight revealing faces wash child clean by terror. The claustrophobia grows mythic. Mundane shaving becomes a defiant ritual, and a single drop of leaking oil signals possible death. At Gibraltar, engines stall in crushing depths. The sub seems to prey in metallic shrieks until it miraculously resurfaces. Homecoming, flares ignite joy. Then Allied bombers strafe the dock, shredding triumph into shrapnel. The last frame freezes over dying men who almost outlived fate, underlining war's cruel lottery. Sometimes, survival expires minutes after arrival. Come and See, 1985, director Ilham Klimov. Belarusian countryside, 1943. 14-year-old Flyora digs a rifle from sandy earth, expecting glory. The audience already senses graves beneath every birch. Klimov shoves us into Flyora's widening pupils as Nazi Einsatzgruppen eclipse the sky in black leather thunder. Sound design warps, artillery becomes insect buzz, sanity fractures like a photograph burned at the edges. We march through peat bogs where partisans hide, though safety is illusion. Village elders shot, barns torched, survivors herded into churches that erupt like funeral pyres. Flyora's cherubic face erodes frame by frame, losing freckles to soot, teeth to famine, and childhood to horrors language refuses. A final encounter with a Hitler portrait dissolves in reverse montage newsreel, as if history itself begs to rewind. Yet, Flyora cannot fire. Revenge would perpetuate the loop. The camera lingers on his tear-furrowed mask, a boy aged into witness, and forests whisper the one commandment war never heeds. Remember. Saving Private Ryan, 1998, directed by Steven Spielberg. June 6, 1944. Amphibious ramps slam onto Omaha Beach, spitting men into a meat grinder of steel and surf. Spielberg's Steadicam staggers beside them, blood spraying the lens until horizon and lens blur crimson. Amid chaos, Captain Miller receives a quieter mission. Locate the last surviving Ryan brother and send him home. The squad advances through hedgerows where cicadas trill over distant mortar fire. Each new corpse forces them to revise the arithmetic of sacrifice. Miller's own shaking hand foregrounds the price of command. Every order he gives chisels away certainty. In a bombed French village, Ryan refuses evacuation. He won't abandon brothers in arms. The ensuing standoff at a stone bridge pits dwindling GIs against panzers, rifles against morality's weight. As planes roar overhead and water runs scarlet, Miller whispers, "Earn this." Decades later, an old man knees before white marble, asking if a single life saved justified so many lost. Spielberg leaves the ledger open, letting viewers tally valor's cost. Schindler's List, 1993, directed by Steven Spielberg. A lone candle flickers in color before surrendering to black and white. A world where morality will smolder but rarely blaze. Oskar Schindler, suave in silk lapels, courts Nazi officers with cognac and charm, plotting profits from enamelware contracts. Yet behind factory gates, accountant Itzhak Stern transforms employment lists into lifelines. Each type name, a pulse beating against oblivion. The liquid hiss of Zyklon B haunts smokestacks at Auschwitz as relentless as rainfall. Meanwhile, Schindler's conscience sparks under the gaze of children herded like cattle. When he pivots from war profiteer to rescuer, the film trades cynicism for staggering grace. Bribery becomes baptism, and a gold tooth melted into a ring feels weightier than any metal. Cinematographer Janusz Kaminski bathes Krakow streets in stark chiaroscuro, but one girl in a red coat burns into memory, color-piercing monochrome like future bleeding into past. As Soviet dawn approaches, Schindler weeps, lamenting one car, one pin he failed to trade for lives. The survivors gift him the ring. He who saves one life saves the world entire. In their silence, history exhales, a testament that even amid mechanized evil, a single flawed human can jam the gears long enough for others to breathe free. 24 stories, one fractured epoch. From smoke-choked bunkers to piano keys trembling in candlelight, these films channel the war's chaos into living memory. Line them up, hit play, and let history's most harrowing hours unspool, not as dusty footnotes, but as beating hearts that still dare to testify.